Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Hi Donna, it's great to have you here today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, we've got loads to chat about today, haven't we? Do you want to introduce yourself, Donna, and tell people a bit about you?
Yeah. So my name's Donna Chadwick. I've worked in kind of the supported housing arena for about 15 years now. Literally started off as a volunteer supporting young people. And then got my support worker role working with people who are living with a learning disability, that then kind of crossed over quite quickly into what is now I would class as my specialism, which is young onset dementia. There's quite a big connection between people living with a learning disability and young onset dementia. And then it affected me personally in my family as well. So then, moved my way up to sort of senior support worker, team leader, manager of support services, again, with the theme of young onset dementia running through. And then that kind of took me into mental health as well, and then into prisons. What we find is, I know we're talking about it a bit later on, but what we find is people in prison experience conditions 10 years earlier than what they would if they weren't incarcerated. So young onset dementia is something that's quite prominent as well within prison. So it took me into that arena. And then, worked in the national charity sector as a national development manager, and now work as a business development manager for a national organisation who we set up supported housing for anybody really, but my sort of strand and my passion is females coming out of prison. So that's kind of where we are at the minute.
Brilliant. Okay, so really diverse background there with loads of stuff. And on the side of that, you also happen to be a property investor as well, don't you, Donna?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm a property investor. So me and my partner own a property investment company. We have rentals companies, and we also have a development company as well that does developments and interiors. So
brilliant. So you kind of get it from both sides, don't you? I think that's the thing about you understand it from a property investment side, but also from a support side. I think that's something that stands with you. Absolutely. So your current role, you're talking about female prisoners. At the beginning there, I want to start and talk about terminology, because it's always really difficult as to what the right words to use are. Are we talking about ex-offenders? Are we talking about prisoners? What's the right words to use, Donna?
No, I know, me and you have had this conversation, haven't we? So I have an example, I suppose, very recently where I got pulled up. Now, I'm very conscious about language, very, very conscious about it. And over 15 years, I've seen the changes of what was acceptable, it's now not acceptable, it's seen in a different light. So I used to use the term ex-offender quite a lot. It described people quite well for me, I suppose. I didn't think it was offensive. And then I was actually pulled up by the editor of The View magazine, who it's a magazine that is written by women in prison that I subscribe to. And she kind of rang me up and she said, this term ex-offender, she said, when do we stop being offensive? I was like, oh, okay. And she was like, I don't feel like I was ever really offensive, but I feel, what makes me an ex-offender? You know, right. What point did I say? And I stopped and thought, and I was like, okay, I never thought of it like that anymore. So I guess I've changed my terminology to women that have experienced prison, women who have come out of prison, women who have been released from prison. I think language is so important. I think it's very subjective, and I think it's extremely personal. I think there are some terms that we can all probably start using, you know, that are more positive. But that was one that came up for me recently that I was kind of pulled up on, and kind of realign myself. And
and that's the term I've used a lot, is ex-offenders. So absolutely, a lot of sense. It's very, very difficult, isn't it? And as you say, it's personal. Everyone has their own take on the words that they want to be used to describe them or their experiences, don't they? So it's taking cues from people as they're talking, isn't it?
And I think ultimately just trying to have that perspective as, does this kind of create stigma for the individual that we're talking about? Because that's a big thing. So like people living with or people with challenging behaviour, that sticks in my throat, does that? Because we're instantly sort of labelling somebody, putting somebody in a box, but actually no, let's so it's I completely agree. It's something to look at. So ex-offender I don't use anymore.
Okay, perfect, that's great, thank you. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and what that work is.
Okay, so I've been doing some work for just over a year now, specifically for women who are leaving prison. And I hope it's interesting, but I've written some facts down to share with the people that tune into your podcast. And I just want to explain a little bit about women in prison as well, if that's okay, because
brilliant.
It is a bit different to men. So what I've been doing is working with prisons on a national basis. There's 11, 12 female prisons across the country. And I've been working with them in terms of what does home mean to the women. I've been working in terms of what is offered to women once they leave prison. You know, do they get a home straight away? What does that look like? And I was actually quite shocked when I started doing my research and when I started working with women, and prisons as well were very, very open with me with what needed to be in place in terms of supported housing for these individuals. So is it okay if I just give you some facts? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's brilliant, Donna.
Okay, so just to kind of put it in context of women tend to have experienced some sort of trauma before they've gone into prison. Not all, but most. And if they haven't experienced it before, the trauma of going into prison, women are usually the caregivers to children, having children taken away. That trauma alone can then trigger quite a lot of challenges for a woman. So in terms of stats, we've got 54% of women in prison have been victims of violence before incarceration. That's usually the 12 months before incarceration.
That soon before, wow.
Yeah, so within 12 months. 53% of women report having experienced emotional, physical or sexual abuse as a child. We've got 80 to 85% of women in prison are experiencing some sort of mental health challenge, which shocked me actually quite a lot. I think that's quite high. And on release, we've got 1 in 20 women sleeping rough. Which again, I mean, sleeping rough, we're talking sort of street homeless. Yeah. We're not talking sofa surfing. We're not talking just no consistent accommodation. We're talking actually on the streets sleeping rough. Now, in terms of the women that I work with, and a bit of a personal point of view as well. So I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder about 10 years from a trauma that I went through. And just me living my life, having a job day to day, I know the challenges of PTSD. I know that I like routine. I don't like things that, just come out of the blue, whatever that is, even somebody knocking on the door, coming around for a coffee that I don't expect. I like to I suppose I like to kind of feel in control. I like to know what to expect. So a lot of the women that I work with are going into prison with some sort of trauma disorder like PTSD. So they're going in having not dealt with or able to manage the symptoms of PTSD. You've potentially gone through the grief of having children taken away. You're then put in this completely new environment that you have to get used to. Now, the prisons that I've visited, Drake Hall in particular, have a trauma-informed programme specifically for the women. It is fantastic. The rehabilitation within these prisons is brilliant from what I've seen. And even to the point where they train women to be trauma-informed within the prison, and then they teach other women in the prison about it. So it becomes it's brilliant. Where it kind of falls down a little bit is you've then got women who are getting into a routine, they're getting the therapy, they're getting counselling. You know, some women can work from prison as well. There's a lot of opportunities. Keeping fit and healthy, which is a big part of having PTSD and a mental health condition. Then you're told that you're going to be released, but you've not had any indication of where you're going, where you're going to end up. What does release look like if you've never been through that before? And what the women fed back is, all of a sudden this routine is completely smashed to pieces, and you're back at square one again with your trauma, with your anxiety. Now, when I spoke to the prisons and I spoke to a lot of charities on a national basis of what does happen to these women on release, and basically what happens is they get a date. If it's possible for somebody to link in with them on the outside, like a key worker, they'll do it. If not, then it doesn't happen. And they're given £45 in their pocket and they're told to go. So instantly, you've had all of this security, you've had all this support and help. You actually might be in the best place you've ever been in terms of your life. quite often think you're getting your children back when you come out of prison. And actually, if you don't have a safe, secure, supportive environment to go to, then all that hard work is gone instantly. So then what we find is women either just revert back to coping mechanisms, whether that's sex work, whether it's addiction, whether it's whatever that coping mechanism is, aggression, theft, just to survive. So we then see that 58% of women are back in prison within a year.
Wow.
So it's quite a revolving door process, really, just because they don't have a home or a support system at that point on release. So the cycle then continues. I mean, in terms of the effects of then children, so a lot of women will work hard for their children. So it's this, I'm going to get well, I'm going to get myself out of here, I'm going to get my children back. So in terms of stats for kids, there's about 17,200 children affected each year because their mums are in prison, and only 9% of those children stay with their father. So the rest of them, if they have other family members, will go there. If not, they will go into the care system. So that again is quite a big statistic. So again, the woman comes out of prison, but she doesn't have a home. How do you then get your children back if you don't have a home and that support system around you? So yeah, we see a lot of reoffending. We've seen the accommodation that is offered. I mean, I've known women that reoffend just to get back in prison because the accommodation is so poor when they come out. Some of the pictures are horrendous, and I actually don't blame them at all. And they're thrown into a world where they've no routine, they've no control, they can't get back on their feet again, they've got 45 quid in their pocket. That's kind of the situation where we're in at the minute as a country for women. Now, women only make up 5% of people in prison. So in terms of that stat, it's very, very small. But in terms of the statistics around the impact of what happens after, it's much bigger than men. So it's a big problem at the minute. So in terms of my job is to work with the support provider that I work for, to liaise with these women, to go into the prisons and speak to these women well in advance of release. We offer a trauma-informed approach for them, so we get to know them, they get to know us. Are they happy with the service that we're giving? It's a two-way street. They've got to be happy with us, and we've got to be able to meet their needs. And we basically offer them a home which they see the pictures of, they know exactly where the address is, they know where they are, and we pick them up on release and we take them and do sort of our induction in terms of our support service that we provide. But it's very, very rare is that kind of model. And some of the bigger support providers, so NACRO come to mind, they're huge, and an amazing support provider. Some of the contracts that they're given in different areas, again, will give amazing support to a woman when she's released, but that's only for 13 weeks. Right. Now, if that was me, I couldn't even consider getting back into the community. You know, everybody wants you to focus on education and employment and stuff when you come out. I'd be thinking about week 14. Like, I'm all right for 13 weeks, but what happens at week 14? Yeah. Where do I go then? Who helps me then? So it's a huge problem. I mean, in terms of money, it costs about £38,000 a year to keep a female in prison, 70 in Bronzefield, which is a private prison. So we're, again, big money. And if that revolving door keeps happening just because somebody hasn't got a safe, secure home.
And also, I guess that when you're looking at the financial impact, you know, just aside from the emotional impact on the children, you know, the country supporting children in the care system is expensive too, isn't it? So you add that into those costs as well.
Huge cost. Absolutely huge cost. So, and this is something, if people do kind of keep in touch with what's happening in legislation and government, this is quite a hot topic at the minute, is women coming out of prison. A lot of women during COVID were released early, especially if they were pregnant or they were coming to the end of their sort of sentence anyway. They were released early out of prison. So we were housing or trying to offer homes on quite a quick basis and almost like emergency accommodation for them. But ultimately, it's about consistency. It's about offering a home that somebody can be proud of, that they can call their own. Being in prison isn't fun for obvious reasons. And I don't know whether we're talking about sort of the property investment side of it.
But
the kind of type of house that's offered, the type of accommodation that's offered, really has a big impact on whether somebody is going to kind of take charge and, you know, grow from there, or whether they go back.
So what kind of property is needed, Donna?
So for us, we've and me personally as well, have come away from a HMO model. So the HMO model was extremely popular a few months ago, to be fair. If you've been in prison, you have to share everything, and it's a big deal, you know, if somebody uses something that was yours, or you just get sick of sharing stuff. So then you then get put in a HMO, which could be the most beautiful HMO you've ever laid your eyes on. You could have an ensuite, so you've got your own bathroom, which is a step up, but you're still sharing a shelf in a fridge, or you're sharing cupboards. What we found is, if that dynamic of women in that HMO are not bang on, somebody might use an egg, or somebody might take a drink by accident that isn't theirs. To us, that might be a small thing. To somebody who's been through all of that and had to share, and is struggling with their mental health in terms of trauma, that's huge, and that can cause massive problems. So with, I think, very small HMOs, sort of 3-bed, 4-bed max, can work with the right women. Some people need that, some people sort of build their own community in that, but we've kind of gone to more, I guess, what I'd call like a bed sit or a studio, so something not too big. Because the other thing is, when I spoke to women, they say, I can't manage a whole house, or a 1-bed apartment is just far too big. So a studio, really good size, but you've got everything's your own in there. You've got your own space. If you choose, you've got your own front door. If you choose to go out, that's entirely your choice. And you can let in whoever, you know, it's all down to choice, empowerment. So yeah, we've kind of gone down the studio route. And then from there, in terms of the support that we offer, once somebody really feels as though they're tenancy ready, they then get, like, well, I suppose whatever they need. If that is a 1-bed apartment and they're happy with that, great. If they have children and need a 3-bed house, then that's absolutely fine as well. So it does vary, but the HMO model, just the HMO model, yeah, we've come away from that.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, that people need that element of control over their lives and things, don't they? Absolutely. Do you have any tips or any advice for property investors who are looking to work with these women?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, so I wrote some things down. So yeah, really considering the property that's required for women, first of all, and considering if they can, if you can stack it up in your figures. So we try to put things like a lot of soundproofing in there, because again, loud bangs, loud noises can trigger PTSD, it can trigger anxiety. So just sort of thinking about the decor, like this lighting area can really have an impact on somebody. So that's quite a trauma-informed approach. If you know that you are going to be housing women, whoever you're working with, research the client group, because I know as a property investor, I know you're only providing the property, but if you can have a trauma-informed approach, so I'd recommend people look at One Small Thing, which is a national charity, or Women in Prison, Prison Reform Trust, just to read up about the client group really and how to design accommodation that's suitable. I'd look at the charities and really do due diligence on them. Some of them can look incredible from the outside, and I've just been called in for one that's failing women quite drastically. And I spoke to them, I can't remember whether it was on your group or not, Lisa, but somebody contacted me recently about a provider that they'd been in touch with, and it looked great from the outside, but I knew them. So we had a good natter, and I said, look, this is my experience, just do your due diligence. That's all I'd recommend. So it's always really important to do that. I think to keep on top of, if you're not, just to keep on top of legislation and what's coming out around regulation. So I sit on the Ministry of Justice Dynamic Frameworks. So what that means is we get tenders through from the Ministry of Justice around women. And I know at the minute that they're called Vanguard sites. So there's the country's split up into 5 different Vanguard sites. And what the Ministry of Justice are doing, they put out a contract to support providers to house people coming out of prison for up to 84 nights. And then the idea is that after your 84th night, or before, if if better, you go into long-term accommodation. So there are definitely opportunities for property investors to get in touch with their local authorities, because this should be happening. I think it starts in July. I think that's when the contracts are given. So I know we always say, don't we, try and get in touch with the local authority. But I know it's
not so easy, is it?
It's not that easy. It isn't that easy. But at the same time, the local, so I'm in contact with Leeds at the minute. They had, I think it was 72 women in a hotel that needed housing, and so we've kind of gone in as one of the providers to support some of those women. I think it's just knowing the client group, if I'm completely honest. And in charities, a lot of the charities, like the big ones, like NACRO, they only get commissioned sometimes for 13 weeks or 12 weeks accommodation. Very, very rarely do you get commissioned as a charity for, you know, the whole lifespan of somebody to offer them a lifetime support. So it's just saying, look, can we dovetail onto the end of your model? This is what we do. Don't be afraid to take charities around your properties, you know, and really kind of show them what you do. But I've always found, and for me as well, sort of being on the national charity side of things, if I'm speaking to somebody who has tried to have an understanding of that client group, who knows what they're talking about, I buy into that a lot more than property investors. Got a horrible stigma with it as well, hasn't it? But if you know that client group that's going in and you understand it and you're willing to learn, charities will, you know, it makes yourself very relatable. But ultimately, all I can say is this: it's huge. This problem for women is huge. And if we as property investors can offer homes that are safe, secure, and like I said, that these women can be proud of and get their children back and become part of society, I think ultimately that's what we need to do. And just for one final stat, if that's okay, before we stop, because I know I'm going on, is that Home Office research has found that prisoners, females, who have accommodation on release are 4 times more likely to have employment, education, or training arranged than those that don't have a home. So that small thing, that house, that safe, that security, has a huge knock-on effect on everything else as well. So so it's a massive problem, and great area to get into if you are an investor.
Yeah, absolutely. Donna, thank you. It's been really brilliant chatting to you.
Thanks for having me.
We'll put the links to some of the things that you were talking about in the show notes so people can get hold of those resources. Thank you.
Thank you.